These workers agreed to significant pay cuts, increased health care costs, and reduced retirement benefits just to keep the mine running. Workers took those cuts with the understanding that they would be reversed when the mine was profitable again. Mr. Driscoll, do you know how much profit Warrior Met Coal made last year?
I don't.
According to their 2022 annual report, Warrior Met made over $641 million in profit last year. And this is not a fluke. We just heard a little bit about Warrior Met Coal and its leases and permits, but so far this conversation has left out the other major news about the company, its ongoing labor dispute with the United Mine Workers of America. In March of this year, UMWA workers at Warrior Met Coal ended a 2-year strike with no improved contract. This was the longest strike in Alabama's history and a disappointing outcome on many levels. See, these workers had personally sacrificed to keep the mine running when the previous owner, Walter Energy, went bankrupt in 2016. And I think it's important to talk about this because this is exemplary of not just one company's treatment of its mine workers, but an industry's treatment of its workers. And in that same report, Warrior Met Coal calls itself socially minded, but less than 2 weeks ago, a judge with the National Labor Relations Board found that Warrior Met Coal violated labor laws during the strike. And unfortunately, Warrior Met is not the only coal company with this kind of track record. Coal started declining in 2008 as cheaper and cleaner forms of energy became more available. And since then, we have seen significant waves of bankruptcies in the industry. And Ms. Kendall, when a coal company goes bankrupt, can you briefly explain what happens to worker pay and benefits?
Part of the answer is probably it depends on the company and the particular circumstances, but in general, workers are very vulnerable. We've had members who are former coal miners who have lost their jobs overnight, lost their paycheck overnight, and lost their retirement benefits as well.
So when these coal companies go bankrupt, they shed their liabilities for healthcare and pensions. They no longer have to cover workers' healthcare, workers' pensions. If a new company, like Met Coal, buys that previous bankrupt company's assets, the contract will, almost without a doubt, be worse for those workers as well. And in addition to those workers forfeiting pension, healthcare, and other employee benefits through bankruptcy, reclamation also becomes a significant issue. And we see some photos right up here of some of the environmental damage that happens with some of these mines. But those companies are supposed to be responsible for reclamation responsibilities here. Can you speak to some of the environmental and public health impacts on coal country communities in these instances?
Well, our members, many of our members are ranchers in coal country, and they have experienced groundwater depletion and surface water depletion. I think for folks who are familiar with ranching, you know how important water sources are, and especially natural springs and watering holes. And so to lose those due to coal mining in an area is a huge concern. And the general experience of our members has been that those resources are not replaced. So that means they have to haul water at great expense. It takes a great deal of time. We're extremely concerned about reclamation delays in our area. Just 17% of the mined lands in reclamation in Wyoming and 20% in Montana have been completely reclaimed over decades. And it's a very big concern that the reclamation bonds that are in place are not sufficient to ensure that reclamation occurs. So it's a big concern when bankruptcy is a prospect.
So not only when these companies go bankrupt, they strip workers of their benefits. Workers don't get health care, they don't get pensions. But then also they don't fully meet the responsibilities of reclamation in repairing harm to local lands because the bonds are insufficient. Is that correct?
Well, we haven't seen that yet, but the bonds are the backstop, and the fact that bonds are not sufficient to cover the cost of reclamation, and the fact that self-bonding is still allowed by the law, even though it's been phased out in many states, is a big concern that needs to be addressed.
And how could the federal coal program be improved to make sure that mines are quickly and fully reclaimed in the industry?
Well, I think when we talk about the federal coal program, we're talking about BLM leasing federal coal. So their role is really, in our view, they could consider things like setting a target for mines to reclaim perhaps 50% of their existing disturbed lands before they get future leases. Maybe that's not the right level, but I think they could be looking at creative policies that would encourage reclamation, or they certainly could require that sufficient bonds be posted to cover the costs of reclamation.
Thank you. I yield back.